Our next panel is the first part of Digitize or Disappear. It is led by Kristine Khouri, who is an independent researcher based in Beirut, who will tell us about her experience with archiving and digitizing and going and understanding the very, very important archive of the Sultan Gallery. Is that right? Thank you very much once again. Please join me in thanking Dr.
First, I'd like to thank everyone at the Global Art Forum for the invitation to speak today. It's been a lovely journey over the last few years to be a part of the forum in various ways. And today I'm speaking in the context of a workshop that's taking place over the next 2 days, hosted by the Global Art Forum, about digitizing archives. And it's grown to be a really amazing group of individuals and participants who engage with archives either as an institution, as individual practitioners, artists. And I think it's really pertinent to, at this moment, think about what it means to look at archives, to find material histories and stories, and also what it means to digitize them and figure out ways to make them available to the world. So I will sort of just give a brief introduction of why this is interesting to me. So I think that, what I'm going to be presenting about today are 2 different projects that I've worked on. And most of my research is focused around production and exhibition of visual art in the Arab world in the period of the 60s and 70s. Scholarship and writing about that period is scarce. It exists. There are scholars doing work, there are institutions organizing their materials, developing archives, and supporting research and writing around that period. That period is a really remarkable period of production of exhibitions from Kuwait to Tunisia to Baghdad, Beirut, Damascus, and with the sort of recent interest in the last 10 years in the art market to sort of look back at that period, there's a lot of work to be done, and that work is happening in trying to recover stories of exhibitions, recover stories of galleries, and the work of artists. And you may be seeing these in different places through the forms of exhibitions, through writings, and it's a community that's growing, and it's a really exciting project, kind of a worldwide project. So it's a process, it's a long process, and a lot of people want information now, as soon as possible. But research takes time, and recovering these stories and recovering these histories is something that requires a lot of trust and patience, and a community of people who are doing that. One began with the presence of an archive. That's the archive of the Sultan Gallery. And in a way, a revival of a history of this gallery, a gallery that exists today that's run by Farida Sultan, but whose first life began in 1969. And the Sultan Gallery is, as we sort of ended on a really appropriate note, of the work of Ghazi and Najat Sultan, was an interesting place. It was not too far from here. A lot of you are staying at the Sheraton. It was on the Sheraton roundabout in this building, which you saw a similar image before. The space was a modest space, and I think modest is a really important word. I think that's a word that is an important adjective for what was happening in Kuwait at that time and for the people who were doing this work. It came out of love and passion, and these projects, as you saw with Al Arabi, were among various projects that came out of the initiative of individuals, of people who are passionate and wanted to bring the world to Kuwait and take Kuwait to the world. The space was a small space. It was about, is this working? The space was about 100 square meters at most. It had an interior that was designed by Ghazi Sultan, who was an architect, and he was one of the 2 co-founders. The walls were covered in a raffia-type material. It was not a white cube gallery that one would see today. And it was a space that many people came to spend time in. They would spend time, they would go see the exhibitions, they would hang out. It was a salon in many ways, as the way that many galleries functioned at that time. There was there was a bookshop. One of the most important bookshops at that time was next door. So it was a center of life. It was the center of town. as was sort of previously mentioned, the gallery was started by Ghazi and Najat Sultan, who are brother and sister, part of a family that had lived in India, studied abroad, and returned to Kuwait. And I think that that's part of what we see with a lot of these projects. They returned to Kuwait at a time when the country was being built. And they saw that there was an opportunity to contribute. And they took that opportunity. And because of both of their interests in culture, decided to open a gallery. So this gallery was quite remarkable. They decided that this, and this gallery in fact was the first professional Arab art gallery in the Gulf. And it's a superlative, we love superlatives in the Gulf, but it is legitimately the first professional Arab art gallery. And what's interesting is that they had a mission to display Arab artists. And there's quite a bit of documentation that sort of references why Arab art, why not international art, why not Kuwaiti art only, why not Indian art. And so there's a really beautiful letter that was written by Ghazi, I think it was by both Ghazi and Najat, claiming that, that their mission was to display the work of young, modern Arab artists. These were artists who were generally overlooked by their societies, and there was inherently lacking in the Arab world the proper encouragement for the arts. Their frustration with the over-bureaucratic nature of Arab governments, seeing that they did a poor job in exchanging and sharing artists across borders, they saw this limited relationship. This sounds maybe very familiar to today, which is pretty remarkable. But it's people like Ghazi and Najat and Farida and others today that make this exchange possible. And that was a really unique moment to bring in artists to a country like Kuwait, and it ended up really building a scene. It was in a way an educational project. And the Sultan Gallery was one of several galleries in Kuwait at that time. But what was interesting is that they operated in a sort of a network of Arab artists, of Arab galleries, showing, and when I say Arab is because their mission was to show Arab artists. And this was a common practice during that period in the late 60s and early 70s. There were galleries dotting cities in Baghdad, Beirut, Damascus, and Casablanca, like Gallery Nadar in Casablanca, L'Atelier in Rabat, Contact Gallery in Beirut, and Gallery 1 in Beirut as well. So there were galleries, and you see in the archives that they were in contact with these galleries. That's where they were learning about these exhibitions. They were learning about artists from Syria, from Iraq, from Palestine. And so Kuwait was a part of that network. We saw that with Al Arabi, and we see that through the exchange and through the work of these individuals. The images, I apologize that they are the way they are, but they're photographs from the archive, which is now being scanned, so we'll have really beautiful images soon. But these are some images from exhibitions that were taking place at that time. So just to sort of backtrack, the gallery opened on March 25th, 1969, less than a year after Ghazi's return. It opened under the patronage of the head of the state, the Emir, Sheikh Abdullah Jabir al-Sabah, and it was a two-person show. It was an exhibition with work by Munir al-Qazi, a Kuwaiti artist, and Iraqi artist Issam al-Said, both of whom had lived in London and were friends with Najat. While the first exhibition hosted 2 artists' work, the remaining exhibitions over the years were one-man shows. They held approximately 8 to 10 exhibitions a year until the invasion of Iraq in 1990, when the gallery closed. So I'll just take you through some images. Some of the artists, and you're seeing some names, are names that you recognize today if you're familiar with modern art in the Arab world. From Iraq, there is Diya al-Azawi, Hashim Samarchi, Rafa Nasiri, Nohar Radi, Saleh Jumai, Salam Dabbagh. From Syria, Fatih Mudarris, Ghayas al-Akhras. From Egypt, Salah Tahir, Muhammad Musa, Abdul Wahab al-Mursi, Adam Hnain, Layla Shawa from Palestine. From Lebanon, Farid Haddad, Atal Adnan, Amin al-Basha, and from Kuwait, Munir al-Qazi, Basil al-Qazi, Suad al-Aisa. From Morocco, Mohammed Malihi. This is just a few of the names, so many of them are quite familiar. So the gallery functioned in a very interesting way. They sold work. It was a commercial gallery. That was how they survived. But what happened was that unbelievable collections were built in Kuwait, institutional collections and personal collections. And this is something, when I speak to colleagues about when the first of institutional Arab art collections were built. We had arguments about it, but we think that actually Kuwait was probably one of the earliest places where individuals were building these collections. And I hope you all get a chance to go to the Arab Fund because that is one of the institutions that started hosting or started collecting work early on. Prior to that, the Kuwait Fund as well. So you can kind of get a sense of the variety of audience, mini skirts and niqabs, foreigners and locals. Cigarettes sometimes allowed in the gallery. Farida. So I'm sort of bringing the Andy Warhol. So as was spoken in the last panel, Andy Warhol visited Kuwait in 1977. It was not at the Sultan Gallery, but it was due to individuals like Najat, like Ghazi, who, because of their connections and friendships, were able to make possible this visit, where he displayed and sold work from his cats and dogs collection, also had offered to do commissions of people's cats, dogs, and horses. From what we know, there have not been any commissions done, but if anyone does know of any, it would be great to see. What's interesting to me and what compelled me to do research in the Sultan Gallery, there we go, there's the ribbon cutting. What was interesting to me was that looking at the Arab art scene in the 1960s and 70s, it became clear that galleries played a really central role in telling the story of Arab art, of how artists started showing work across borders, how Iraqi artists started showing in Morocco. Diat Lazawi had first, who's a very well-known Iraqi artist, first showed in Beirut, after in Baghdad, and his next stop was Kuwait. And there was a relationship. Ghazi had traveled to Beirut, was meeting with Yusuf al-Khal at Gallery 1. There was exchange, and it was a very natural exchange between people who owned galleries, between poets and writers who were spending time at these galleries. So the history of Arab art galleries in the 1970s is a very interesting structure to look at, to understand where the development of Arab art came from. Today, it's a very different place from where kind of the people are coming together. And what drew me to look at the history of the Sultan Gallery is the archive that is held there. Farida and the rest of the Sultan family did a great job in keeping the archive safe, even after it closed and after and during the war and the invasion. And there's a remarkable archive that really tells the story of how the gallery was established, how they operated, and who is involved, and the correspondences reveal a lot between these links, between cities, between people, and really tell the story of a Kuwait, of a particular moment, which if archives like this are to be lost or were to not exist, it would be very difficult to tell the story of a really progressive moment in Kuwait. And so what's actually happened is I spent a little bit of time in the archive a couple of years ago through a residency with Arte East and the Sultan Gallery, going through the paperwork, which was pretty remarkable. I think very few people today from galleries keep archives or keep records like this, even from that time. This is a pretty amazing archive to look at. And there's paperwork there, the pamphlets from exhibitions, their price list. What you can draw from this archive is a whole history of Arab art centered around Kuwait, but really that was a part of a larger world. A price list. We know who bought works. There's a way to trace 5 minutes. Cool. Okay. There's a way to trace a history through an archive, and I think that's what's compelled me to spend time in this archive. And due to the work that Farida has been really committed to, they've been digitizing the archive. And the next steps are being figured out, but trying to figure out the ways to make available these stories is really important to the public. I'm gonna go quickly through a second project. These are the names of the collectors. Write them down quickly if you're from an auction house. Just kidding. That's why they should not know these things. After my time doing a residency, we organized a small exhibition about the history of the first 5 years of the gallery. Showed documentation from the founding years also showed artwork from the collection that the gallery has, as artists had to give a work to the gallery with every exhibition. It was a part of their contract, and so the gallery itself has a pretty amazing collection. And with that, works by artists and corresponding documents, price lists, correspondences, etc. So I'm going to move quickly through a second project, which starts from a very different place. In the context of the Sultan Gallery, the archive led to the research. The availability of a story, the availability of material led to a possibility of writing a history, of bringing back the history of a gallery that's very much needed to be spoken about as people work in the Gulf and see what's happening, developing programs and projects in the Gulf and the rest of the Arab world. Another project that I have been working on for several years with my colleague Rasha Salti is about an exhibition that took place in Beirut in 1978. It was called the International Art Exhibition for Palestine. In the case of this project, we had a catalog, or we had a photocopy of the catalog. A photocopy of a catalog for an exhibition that happened 3 years into the civil war in Lebanon. It was an exhibition in support of the Palestinian cause, and had works by 200 artists from 30 countries. Let me say that again, 200 artists from 30 countries. That's bigger than biennials that are taking place today around the world, and this was happening in the middle of the Civil War. So logistically bringing in work is a mind-boggling feat. So we started with this catalog, and what was so intriguing was the number of artists, the quality of artists, Arab, non-Arab. There was, Miro, Tapias, Chilida had given works. The important Arab artists from Iraq to Morocco to Lebanon, and of course Palestinian artists. But what you start to understand in doing this research is that this exhibition actually was meant to be a museum for Palestine. It was meant to be a museum in exile for Palestine that would travel around the world until it could return to a free Palestine. So these artists whose work was exhibited in this exhibition, their works became part of a collection. And so this collection, this exhibition was actually organized by the PLO, by their plastic art section, and the main organizer was a Jordanian artist named Mona Saoudi. And it took place, it was open for a month. It was supposed to be open for 2 weeks. It was extended. And the exhibition took place. Some works traveled to Tokyo, some works traveled to Tehran and to Oslo. But in 1982, with the Israeli invasion of Beirut, the collection was essentially destroyed. So there's no collection, there's no cogent archive. Right now, works are sort of popping up and being found, but what intrigued us was how to write the history of an exhibition with no archive. How do you write the story of this remarkable exhibition that many people forgot or don't remember? And so we spent many years, and thanks to the support of various people, we're able to do interviews, find material, and that's where the digitization came in. Most of the time, many people were very generous with us. We took photographs with our phones, with proper cameras. We scanned, and so what we ended up was with a beautiful digital archive. This archive and this story, which begins with this exhibition in Beirut in 1978, really ends up in the rest of the world, and it ends up in the rest of the world trying to map out politically engaged artistic practices in the 1970s. Artists in Italy that were doing interventions about Palestine in 1976 during the Venice Biennial, to artists in Japan who were traveling to Beirut to live in the camps to understand what was going on. So really this exhibition in '78 was a starting point for us to really explore what exhibition history means, to understand what museographic practice was at that time, and really what it opened up was the practice of artists organizing their own biennials, artists organizing their own salon, artists organizing their own museums. So Rasha Salti and I had spent several years doing this research, doing interviews, gathering material, and eventually transformed this research into an exhibition which opened up last month in Barcelona at the Makba. And it's a very dense exhibition. But what's interesting with respect to other exhibitions, archival exhibitions, are that there are no original documents. Digitization played a very strong role in making this exhibition possible and in exhibiting it. So these are just some images, and I will end here because my time is up. Thank you very much.